Hi, there's a project that's been on my mind lately. I wanted to talk through it here and see if any of you had any thoughts on it. So, since I moved into my new house, one of the things that has become available to me again is I have enough room to set up my TV and game consoles so I can play some older games that I used to enjoy way back in the day when I had a living room that wasn't completely taken over by NES machines. Anyway, so I have another room for that stuff now. And one thing that's happened to me over the last few years, since I've been Let's Playing so many things, is I'm not entirely sure I know how to enjoy video games anymore now without an audience. If I try to play on my own, it's just a very different experience, and there are some older games that I'd like to play with an audience, possibly, and re-experience them in a different sort of context. So, what I'm thinking of doing is playing through every Final Fantasy game. Now, there's an asterisk next to the word every. I'll get into that in a moment. This is sort of inspired by Raukau's All the Mega Man series, which I've been watching and enjoying. I had played a few Mega Man games, but nowhere near as many as apparently there actually are. But yeah, it's been real interesting and informative to go through the history of an entire game series and just see how it's evolved and changed over time. Final Fantasy is a series that I used to be super into when I was younger for many years. I'd look forward to each new game coming out and just get really into it. But I feel like the lens through which I was viewing the games was fairly limited. I was younger. I feel like I did not really understand the story to most of them very well at all. And I don't know, I just wasn't very focused with the way I was going through them. There are a lot of the games in the series that I just have never bothered to finish. I'd like to. So sort of the purpose of this exercise is, well, there are several things. One, like I said, I want to try to understand the story of each game and see how they intertwine, the little bit that they do. And yeah, just kind of look at it through the lens of my current perspective, and also with possibly having some company along the way, people who can help fill in the gaps of things that I don't see myself. And I want to finish the games that I never got around to finishing, and just replay the stuff, even the ones that I did, to re-experience them again, see if they still hold up today. So I've thought a lot about how to do this. It's not the sort of game that I usually play. I don't think these will be in a normal Let's Play format, going up on YouTube episodically. This feels very much like a stream sort of thing. So I'm thinking I'll probably want to stream these. It's going to be a long project. Each one of these games, like, if it takes me 20 hours to finish, that's pretty quick. Most or all of them will probably take more than that. And there are, well, I'll get to the list soon. There are a lot of them. I'm not going to be playing every single one, but anyway, I'll get to that in a sec. So, this series was basically my first exposure to RPGs, or Japanese RPGs specifically, and it just has kind of been with me my whole life in some capacity, and yeah, I just want to revisit it and take another look. So, let's start with streaming schedules. I've said several times that I'd like to establish a regular streaming schedule. I'm going to try and actually do that now and see how it goes. This is tentative. This could change, but for the moment, I'm going to try Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be doing dance game streams. And then some other game on Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern. 1 p.m. seemed like about the best time that everybody from all the different time zones that I know watches my stuff might be able to make it. So those would be on YouTube. The dance game streams would stay on Twitch as before. I know a lot of you don't go to those. That's fine. It's sort of a different sort of thing. So the Saturday stream is the one that I'd be talking about here. So, Final Fantasy. Right, so it's published by a large Japanese company. Therefore, copyright is a little bit touch and go. That's one of the reasons. There are several reasons. That's one of the reasons that I don't want to do an episodic Let's Play here. I've heard of people getting dinged for monetized Let's Plays of modern Square Enix games Final Fantasy itself, as the series, seems to be pretty clear for that, but it's a little bit iffy. So I figure, I don't know, it seems like they're more okay with streams than other stuff. We'll see what happens. I don't want to run afoul of copyright. I've never had a copyright strike, and I'd like to keep it that way. But this project just seems too interesting to let the fear of that stop me. Unless maybe one of you chimes in and says, like, you have experience with this, you tried to do something like this, and it earned you a copyright strike or something. So information like that would be useful to have. And, I'm just wondering, like, is this a good idea at all? If any of you are Final Fantasy enthusiasts or, I wonder if this sort of thing has already been done to death. It's a popular game series. A lot of people have played it. Maybe I'm just retreading ground that other people have already done. Even if I am, I'm still interested in doing this because it'll be my own perspective of going through these games and seeing what they're really about, seeing how they hold up today. And would any of you actually be into this if I did it? So yeah, questions, if you're able to answer any of those. So, I've been spending the last few days figuring out, making sure all my consoles work, figuring out which version of each game to play, because this series has had many, many remakes and re-releases over the years. I had to do a lot of research on this, and I'm still not sure about some of them. So here's my game list. Final Fantasy I, the very first one. This was released on the NES in the United States. So this one actually came over to the US, was localized, had an official one. There was a re-release for the PlayStation, and then later for the PSP. Both of those each got remastered music. They both share the same music tracks. They have differently redrawn graphics. I am not certain whether I want to do the PS1 or PSP versions of each. I have both set up for video capture. They're both available. Leaning toward the PS1. The rule of thumb I'm going for here is to choose the oldest version of each game that's good enough, basically. If there's some really major upgrade, if I play a newer one, then I want to do that. But like the newest, like you can buy most, or not all of these, but most of these games on Steam. But from what I hear, the Steam ports are really, really bad. They're like derivative of mobile phone ports of these games, and that alone just kind of raises some red flags for me. And people tell me they're crashy and just all sorts of problems. So anyway, the older console versions of these games tend to be better from what I found. Anyway, Final Fantasies 1 and 2. I have both of them on the PlayStation 1 and on the PSP, leaning toward PS1. If anybody has a compelling argument one way or the other, I could go for a PSP version instead. Final Fantasy III. Oh, right, so 2. Final Fantasy II was on the NES, was only in Japan for the longest time until the PlayStation release. So that was the first time it had an official US translation. I used to play these on emulators, NES emulators with fan-made translations. So I've been through those experiences a little bit, but I'd like the official translations wherever possible. Right, Final Fantasy III is in a weird place. It didn't receive an official US release until its 3D remake on the Nintendo DS. Nintendo DS is tricky for video capture. There's special hardware that has to be actually physically installed in the handheld to do it. I've ordered a kit, and I've looked at the instructions to install it, so I'm going to try and take that project on to make sure I can capture that, but I have some time before I get to that. I have two games to play first before I get to that one. Final Fantasy IV. This was my first introduction to the series, and had been one of my favorite games for a very long time. I'm going to do the DS remake of it. The SNES version is good. The United States release, the original one, was kind of nerfed compared to the Japanese one. They call it easy type and hard type. So the US got the easy type. It was simplified. A lot of mechanics were taken out. The DS version is an extremely well-done remake. I've been through most of it. I never actually finished it. It is much harder than the original, and I very much want to finish that, and yeah, anyway, that's the version that I want to play there. Final Fantasy V. This was another one that didn't have a US release initially. This was released on the PlayStation somewhere around the time 1 and 2 were, with an official English translation. People have told me that translation's not super great, but that's still the one that I'm going to use. So back to the PlayStation for that one. Then Final Fantasy VI was released in the same package as 5 on the PlayStation. However, I think I'm going to play the SNES version of this one, the very first release, because it's basically already in perfect form there. Had a US release with a, janky Ted Woolsey translation, but perfectly serviceable. So that's the first one that's going to be in its original form on this list. Then we get into the modern 3D PlayStation... modern? Why did I say that word? That's not accurate. Anyway, so the 3D PS1 era. Final Fantasy VII. I'll be playing the PlayStation 1 version of that. Because, again, just like 6, it's pretty much a perfectly serviceable release. Now then, things take a turn. Final Fantasy Tactics happened somewhere around the same time as 7. I'm not sure which one came first. I think it was like one order in the US, the other order in Japan, so just depending on which release order I go by, I could put these in either order. But I very much want to play Final Fantasy Tactics here because it sets up some stuff for later games. It also is a super excellent game. Like, of this entire series, it might actually be my favorite. It's also very different from all the others. Anyway, so that one's going to be slotted in there. PS1 original. Final Fantasy VIII, PlayStation 1, again. Final Fantasy IX, PlayStation 1. This one has a Steam release that might actually be serviceable. So again, if it's good enough, I can maybe be tucked into that. It'd be at a higher resolution, but I'm still strongly leaning toward just going with the original one. Now, PlayStation 2 happened. Final Fantasy X is on the PS2. Apparently there's a PS3 or PS4 remake. I do not own a PlayStation 4. I could buy one for this. I've been tempted a few times. If I have a strong enough reason, and this project would be a strong enough reason, I could totally get one of those. But again, I have the original. It should be fine. That's probably the one I'd play. Then another tactics game, so Final Fantasy Tactics Advance on the Game Boy Advance. This is very different from the first Final Fantasy Tactics. Well, very different, kind of different. It takes place in a world with the same name, but the setting, the Ivalice of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is very different from the original Tactics. However, I want to play it at this point because Final Fantasy XII also takes place in Ivalice. 11 was an MMO. I won't be playing that one. So right, 12 on the PS2. There is a PS4 remake of it that looks extremely good. That's another one that I could maybe be talked into doing the newer one for. So that is tempting. Then 13 happened, and I kind of don't really want to play it because it's really bad. It's on the PS3. It's just, ugh. I own it. I've played through the first little bit of it. Everything I know about it just makes me really not want to play it. But I might include it just as, this is part of the history of the series. It's, I don't know. I'm on the fence about that one. If people really want to see it, if I even get that far, if this project takes off, then I might be up for it, but I'm real tempted to skip that one. Then 14 was an MMO. I won't be playing that one. 15. There is a 15th Final Fantasy. Came out very recently. Was a ridiculously huge project from what I understand, spanning... It take like 10 years to make or something crazy. It was a lot. It looks cool. I've never played it, and I'd like to, and that should be fun. So, that's the core game list. So 2 tactics games, and then numbered series 1 through 15, skipping 11 and 14 because they're MMOs. There are some spin-offs that might be worth looking at. There was so if you don't know about this series, generally a numbered Final Fantasy has nothing to do with the one previous to it, although like I mentioned, 12 happens to take place in the same world as Tactics Advance, but those relationships are kind of rare. There are commonalities. Every game has a character named Sid, for some reason. The characters named Biggs and Wedge show up in them a whole lot. So they're tied together in in various ways, but they don't generally take place in the same world. However, there are some direct sequels. Final Fantasy IV had a direct continuation called The After Years. It was this weird sort of episodic thing released on WiiWare initially, or no, it was on something else. Anyway, WiiWare was the way I initially played it. I didn't play all the episodes. They were very short. Kind of weird. Not sure it's actually any good or worth playing, but maybe. That might happen at some point. There's a second Tactics Advance game, Final Fantasy Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift. It has a long name. I don't own it. I've never played it. I've never finished Tactics Advance. I'd probably be into it, so that could certainly be added to the list. There's a game on the Wii called Chocobo's Dungeon, which is a spin-off of... it's different. It uses a lot of Final Fantasy characters and music and settings, but the mechanics are different. It's in its own little world. But it's very cool. I played all the way through it and enjoyed it very much, so that might be a thing to include. There are multiple Chocobo's Dungeon games. I'll have to do some research to see what the others are and if I want to play them too. The Wii one was the only one that I actually played. There was a direct sequel to... Oh, hang on. These are in a funny order. Let me change this around. So Final Fantasy X had a direct sequel called Final Fantasy X-2. Makes lots of sense. I own it. I've played it a little bit. It looks kind of really bad. I don't know if I want to play that one, but I might be able to be talked into it. 12 had a sequel called Revenant Wings on the Nintendo DS again. I don't own it. I've never played it, but I'm kind of interested. Might be cool. I don't know. I'll have to do some more research into that one. 13 has a sequel called 13-2. Don't know much about it. Don't really want to play 13 in the first place, but I hear that sequel is actually a whole lot better, so maybe that'd be worth playing. I don't know. There's another spin-off called Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube. I've played it a little bit. It's a different sort of game. I'm not really super planning to play that, but I don't know. I might be able to be convinced. Final Fantasy VII had a few sequels. There's one called Crisis Core. Was that on the PSP? I think that's right. Yeah, so Crisis Core on the PSP, Dirge of Cerberus on the PS2, and then one called Before Crisis, which is not available in the US. So that one, even if I wanted to play it, I can't. So Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus are the ones that would be available to me. Don't know about that. There's a game called Bravely Default that I hear talked about. Is this Final Fantasy? Is this part of the series? I hear it's extremely good. Kind of goes back to the roots of the very early games. Yeah, I don't know about that. And then there's Dissidia Final Fantasy. I own it. I've never actually booted it. It's a fighting game. Might try it just a little bit to see what it's like. Anyway, so those are kind of on the maybe pile. And the ones that I will not be playing, on the SNES, there was Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. I don't own it. I've played it just a little bit on an emulator to see what kind of thing it is, and it doesn't seem very interesting. I've heard mostly negative reviews of it, and it's not really a core part of the series, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to skip that one. On the Game Boy, there's Final Fantasy Adventure, which is a weird case where a different game franchise, I think this was... Now, who owned this? Was this a Square thing? So the Mana series, Legend of Mana, Secret of Mana, etc. This was the first entry in it, but was released under the Final Fantasy name in the US for some reason. It's not part of the series. It's a different game series. I don't think I'll play that one. Similarly with Final Fantasy Legend 1 through 3 on the Game Boy. This is part of the Saga series, I'm pretty sure. Again, different RPG series, not part of the whatever. So I'm going to skip that one. Anyway, and 11, 14, and Before Crisis I've covered already. 2 MMOs and one that's just not available to me. Anyway, so hopefully at least some of you know, are familiar with these games. This is a project where I wouldn't mind having like some collaborators. People who are experts in this sort of thing who could help guide me just a little bit in like is any of this a good idea? Should I steer clear of this particular version of the game? If I play Final Fantasy XV on YouTube, am I going to get copyright strikes or things like that? So anyone who knows more about this than I do, if you have advice about doing this, I would love to hear it. And yeah, I also just kind of want to gauge interest. Like, I know this is kind of different from a lot of the stuff that I do, but are you into this? Is this the sort of thing that I should do? Is this a terrible idea? These games can be a little bit grindy. They're very lengthy, very text-heavy. They're RPGs, Japanese RPGs at their JRPGist. But this is still something I'm pretty sure I want to do. I might do a test stream. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to put this up Saturday morning, so that'll be when you'll be seeing this. Then Saturday afternoon at my 1 p.m. time slot that I'm choosing, I'm going to see if I can do a quick test stream just to make sure this works. If that all goes well, then yeah, maybe I'll just make that the first stream in the series. Start through Final Fantasy I and see how things go with it. Yeah, I think that's going to be the plan. And then weekly, after that, I can just continue with that, unless I'm traveling or something. Yeah, okay, I think that's probably my plan. So, yeah, thoughts, feedback, anybody who wants to help guide me through this, with if I need any guidance, maybe I'm already all set. But yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of you who know as much or more about Final Fantasy than I do. So yeah, any extra stuff you have to say about this, I'd certainly appreciate it. And right, so I should mention up front, spoiler policy for this, it's totally open. Say whatever you want about it. I'd prefer not to have, tell me exactly what's going to happen in the story for the games that I haven't played. But, in general, just speak freely. A lot of the purpose of this is to analyze the story of the games and get an idea of what actually goes on there and, analyze the game design and other stuff that I usually do, etc. So yeah, hope this sounds good to you. If you're into it, then yeah, tell me stuff. Come to the stream on Saturday if you're available. If other times of day would work much better for you and you're super into it, then maybe I could be talked into a different schedule. I don't know. Just, yeah, share your thoughts, please. All right. And I hope to see you for this project once it gets started.